As the late afternoon sun filtered through the slatted blinds, 78-year-old Harold Bennett sat on his porch in small-town Ohio, sipping a mug of lukewarm coffee. He'd lived a full life, worked 40 years as a steelworker, raised 3 kids, buried his wife 10 years ago, and learned to live with the quiet that followed her absence. Yet, in all his decades of experience, nothing prepared him for the bitter lesson that came not from war or labor, but from trust. It all began 2 summers ago when Harold decided to rent out the spare room in his house to help with expenses. His pension and Social Security barely covered utilities and groceries, and the medical bills were stacking up after his hip replacement. He was still mentally sharp and proud, but the financial pinch gnawed at him. One day, a young man named Kyle knocked on his door. Clean-cut, polite, and claiming to be a college student needing a room for the summer internship, Kyle seemed like the perfect tenant. Harold, trusting and eager for some company, welcomed him in with a warm smile. Kyle paid the first month's rent in cash, helped carry groceries, and called Harold "Sir." For a while, Harold felt like a father figure again. But slowly Kyle changed. He started coming home late, borrowing tools without asking, and Harold noticed small items going missing. An old watch, his wife's locket, some cash from a drawer. Harold tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. But when Kyle disappeared one day, leaving behind a trashed room and unpaid rent, Harold realized he'd been used. And it wasn't the last time. Later that year, a woman from church named Carol visited Harold regularly. She brought cookies, helped clean his kitchen, and sat with him during Sunday service. One afternoon, she offered to help him manage his bills, claiming her son worked at a bank and she knew how to stretch $1. Grateful and flattered by her kindness, Harold agreed. He handed her a folder of financial papers and gave her limited access to his online banking. 2 weeks later, over $1,500 was gone. When Harold confronted Carol, she cried, claimed her identity had been stolen too, and stormed out. He never saw her again. The police did what they could, but with no concrete evidence or witnesses, they couldn't recover the money. And once again, Harold sat alone, feeling foolish for believing in the kindness of others. It was after these events that Harold's neighbor, 82-year-old Marvin Green, pulled up in his lawn chair next to Harold's and gave him a lecture that would stay with him forever. "You gotta be careful, Harold," Marvin grumbled, lighting his pipe. "When you're old, people don't see you as wise, they see you as weak. And there are some types of people we old folks just can't afford to trust anymore." Harold listened. He had no choice. His savings were thin, his pride even thinner, and loneliness could make anyone blind. Over the next year, Harold learned to spot the patterns, the types of people who took advantage of seniors like him. There was the sweet-talking opportunist like Kyle, who used charm to disarm. They often came under the guise of needing help themselves, a place to stay, a ride, a job reference, but ultimately wanted something. Once they got it, they were gone. Then there were the helpers like Carol, pretending to be good Samaritans but actually probing for financial gain. They usually targeted widows or widowers who seemed lonely and vulnerable, offering assistance that always came with a hidden cost. Another type Harold encountered was the overly friendly salesperson. A young woman named Amanda rang his doorbell one autumn afternoon, selling home security systems. She told Harold that break-ins were common and that seniors were especially targeted. She played on his fears, showed him statistics on her iPad, and even claimed the local sheriff recommended their services. Harold almost signed a 3-year contract until Marvin happened to stop by and recognized the company as a scam outfit that changed names every 6 months. Then there was Kevin, Harold's grandson's friend. In his 20s, fresh out of a breakup and jobless, Kevin asked if he could crash at Harold's for a week. "Just until I get on my feet," he said. Harold, wanting to help family, agreed. Weeks turned into months. Kevin didn't pay rent, left dishes everywhere, invited loud friends over, and once used Harold's car without asking. When Harold confronted him, Kevin acted like he was entitled to everything, calling Harold selfish and out of touch. After Kevin finally left, Harold had to deal with a cracked windshield, broken light fixtures, and missing DVDs from his cherished classic movie collection. And yet, Harold's biggest heartbreak came from someone even closer. His own son, Mark. Mark was once responsible and hardworking, but after losing his job during the pandemic, he started drinking more and blaming everyone else for his problems. He visited Harold often, not to check on him but to borrow money, eat his food, or ask for small loans that were never repaid. Mark would guilt-trip Harold, saying, "You've got everything paid off, Dad. I'm struggling here. Don't you want your son to survive?" At first, Harold obliged. But when Mark showed up one morning, clearly drunk and asking for Harold's credit card, just for a few days, something inside Harold snapped. "I love you, son," he said, voice trembling, "but I'm not your ATM." Mark didn't speak to him for 2 months after that. But something shifted in Harold. He stopped being afraid of being alone. He started valuing peace over approval. He realized that setting boundaries didn't make him cruel. It made him wise. The final kind of person Harold learned to avoid was the pity-monger, those who constantly talked about their misfortunes to manipulate sympathy. A woman named Judy, whom Harold met at the senior center, always talked about her medical bills, her broken furnace, or her ungrateful children. Every conversation ended with a request: money for a ride, a favor, or someone to talk to at 2 a.m. Harold tried to be there for her, but when he declined one of her requests, she coldly told him, "You're just like the rest. Useless." That was the last time he saw her. With time, Harold started sharing his story with others. At the senior center, at church, and even online. He didn't want to spread bitterness but awareness. "Kindness," he said in a local podcast interview, "doesn't mean being a doormat. Wisdom is knowing who deserves your heart, and who just wants your handouts." In spring, Harold began volunteering at a literacy program, helping young adults improve their reading and writing. There, he met real people with humble hearts and no hidden agenda. He felt useful again, not because someone needed to borrow money or a couch, but because he had something meaningful to give. And as the seasons passed, Harold's days filled with quiet joy. He still sipped his coffee on the porch, still talked with Marvin, and still watched the birds gather on the fence. He learned to guard his peace the same way he once guarded his paycheck. He wasn't bitter, just wiser. Old age had taught him a new rule of survival: protect your peace, your finances, your time. 'Cause not everyone who smiles at you means well. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is say no.